It was break time in high school, and a voice called for Satsuki. The blanking out Satsuki flinched and was startled when someone called her name. It was the short-haired girl asking if she was listening. Satsuki apologized for thinking about her boyfriend, even though she was talking with her best friend, Natsuko. Natsuko questioned whether she really was sorry before continuing what she was saying. She told her she has good reflexes and should join the track and field club if she's free after school. Satsuki slumped down on her desk and told her she didn't want to. She didn't want to get all sweaty, and she wasn't free either. Natsuko asked how long it had been since they started dating. Satsuki lifted 3 fingers, indicating 3 months. Natsuko told her to settle down already since they should be done with most things. Satsuki was surprised and asked how and what kind of love life her friend had been leading. Her friend, Natsuko, asked how far they'd gone, which made Satsuki blush. She fidgeted before shyly telling her friend that they'd finally held hands. Natsuko complained about her friend's slowness before checking her phone while Satsuki grabbed her collar. She realized she needed to head off to her club. 3 months ago, the 17-year-old Satsuki Moriyama got her long-awaited first boyfriend. Although Natsuko was saying all those things, her TLP was executed without issues. TLP stands for True Love Plan, Satsuki's ideal love life plan with her boyfriend, Sasaki. His coolness surpasses human intellect. He is at the top of all living beings and is the only god. She drooled as she thought of wanting to see Sasaki. Just then, a cat jumped in front of her, and someone called out her name. She looked back to see a young boy apologizing for making her wait. It was Sasaki. Satsuki frustratingly grabbed her hair and leaned back on the bench while Sasaki asked if she was okay. She was asking God to tell her why Sasaki was so cool. He had long eyelashes, rugged hands, and a destructive smile that could wipe people off the map. They both looked up as the rain started to pour. The soaked Satsuki hoped it was just an evening shower, while Sasaki rummaged inside his bag before placing a towel on her head. He was worried Satsuki would catch a cold, so he gave her a towel he hadn't used yet. And more than anything, he is kind. What she wants to keep to herself the most is his kindness. Satsuki, with a blush on her face, thanked him. The rain finally stopped, and Sasaki told her they should head home before it started raining again and grabbed her hand as they walked. Satsuki smiled, blushing. Suddenly, Sasaki turned around and leaned towards her, placing his hand on the post behind her. She panicked and closed her eyes, thinking she was finally receiving her first kiss. She bid her TLP goodbye as she pouted her lips in anticipation. However, she started to hear Sasaki's confused voice. She slowly opened her eyes and was shocked to see Sasaki floating in the air. He floated higher, and a UFO loomed above him. Sasaki looked up and wondered what it was. Was it a UFO? Satsuki quickly grabbed his leg, pulling him back to the ground. However, she started to float as well. She asked him not to go, but Sasaki warned her it was dangerous and that she had to let go. The stubborn Satsuki didn't let go and kept a firm grip on his leg before hitting the roof, making her pass out. Satsuki woke up, lying on the floor with her hands and feet tied. She got up and looked around but noticed cuffs binding her hands. She tried to release herself from them when suddenly she heard humming. An alien with a party hat and a bucket of popcorn entered the room. When the alien noticed she was up, he quickly called for his captain, reporting that Satsuki had awakened. Satsuki heard footsteps and a voice asking if the alien didn't put her to sleep. The alien responded that he had given her the proper dose. The footsteps stopped before her, apologizing for leaving her on the floor since their ship was rather small. He introduced himself. He's the captain, Baman. They're from the planet Kandran. His subordinate, who was munching on popcorn, was Pui. Satsuki, who was struggling to understand, tried to say the planet's name. She then asked if they were aliens, which made the two laugh. To them, she was an alien. Satsuki couldn't believe that aliens actually existed. However, they were kind of annoying, especially the one on the left. She looked around and asked where Sasaki was. Baman assured her not to worry because he was in a special storage room. She informed them that they were in the middle of a date and asked if they could let them off. Baman laughed and said they couldn't do that since they'll be taking their ajappers. With wide eyes, Satsuki asked what that was and if they were going to die. Although it was a rather violent way of putting things, Baman agreed that, in a nutshell, they were indeed going to die. Satsuki nervously glared at them before rolling back and getting up, preparing to jump. The two flinched as she jumped, grabbing onto Pui and pushing him down, choking him with her legs. Pui asked the captain, Baman, for help. Baman panicked and ordered Satsuki to stop her violence. However, instead of stopping, Satsuki squeezed her legs tighter, choking Pui harder, and demanded that they let them off. They flinched as the ship started to wobble. It was going to crash. Baman informed her that the ship moved based on their life force. If Pui loses consciousness, the ship will stop, and they'll crash. Now that she knows, he asked her to let go. Satsuki refused and demanded that they be let off. Baman rummaged inside his suit's front pocket and complained about her stubbornness before wondering why Earthlings were like that. He pulled something out and pointed it at her, threatening he'd shoot if she didn't let go of Pui. However, what he was holding was not a gun but a chicken leg. He panicked, realizing he'd made a mistake, and warned Satsuki that they'd really crash if she didn't let go of him. Satsuki demanded that, in exchange, they'd let her see Sasaki. Baman quickly agreed to her condition. Once Satsuki entered the special room, she saw Sasaki cuffed inside a storage capsule. She kneeled beside it, crying. She shouted for Sasaki and asked if he was okay and if they had done something to him. The two were dumbfounded as they watched her apologize and scream that she'd let him out. She glared at the two, demanding they let them out now since there were a lot of other humans out there. Baman explained that they couldn't do that because their job was to collect large quantities of Ajapper and bring it back home to their planet. They need a lot of Earthlings' Ajapper, including theirs. Satsuki asked what the Ajapper was, and Bamman coughed, saying he was glad she asked. He explained that Ajapper is a source of energy that only intelligent life forms have. The numbers can vary based on individuals or species, but on average, Earthlings have about 40 Ajapper. Aliens, on average, have about 120 Ajapper, so Earthlings have less in comparison. However, some rare Earthlings show values far higher than their species average. They limit their target to them and efficiently collect Ajapper. Satsuki frowned and asked why they didn't gather them from other aliens. Bamman explained that their species was not made for combat. Ajapper value does not equal combat power. However, it is also true that those with a higher number are formidable. So abducting docile Earthlings is the best and safest method. He then informed her about the amount of her Ajapper, which was 102, and asked her to rejoice since she was on the high side for a human. Satsuki asked about the two's amount of Ajapper. Bamman had 91 Ajapper, while Pee-wee had 74. She commented about them having fewer Ajapper than her before asking how much Sasaki had. Bamman answered that Sasaki had 97,065 Ajapper. She was shocked at the amount, repeating what he had said in confusion, 97,065. Bamman continued. He truly was an extremely rare specimen. With this, they're able to clear their 100,000 Ajapper quota in one go. That's why they were having a celebration, and the reason they couldn't let him go. Sasaki was nothing like the other Earthlings out there. Satsuki glared, but was startled when a laser shot through next to her. It was a warning shot from Bamman, asking her to behave. He may have accidentally pulled a chicken leg out earlier, but he's got a real laser gun now. Pee-wee hid behind his captain while Bamman threatened to kill Satsuki if she was going to resist, even though she was also a fine specimen. Satsuki sweated nervously before asking if they really won't let Sasaki go. Bamman, still pointing his gun at her, responded that they couldn't. She gritted her teeth and proposed to collect the 97,000 Ajapper instead. The two were surprised, and Satsuki asked if they'd let Sasaki go if she collected the same amount of Ajapper as him. Pee-wee, who was hiding behind Bamman, burst out laughing, wondering what she was going on about. Bamman asked how an Earthling like her planned on collecting almost 100,000 Ajapper. She answered that she'd collect them by beating up a bunch of aliens that looked like they had high values. There was nothing for the two of them to worry about, and she'd just die if she failed. After a while, Bamman finally agreed to her proposal, surprising Pee-wee. However, he's got conditions. They will only be there for roughly another year, so Satsuki's deadline was 1 year from today. And during that time, they won't contact each other whatsoever. Only when she hits the quota will they appear once again. He asked if that was fine, to which Satsuki replied with a nod. He pointed to a shelf with all sorts of devices and informed her that there was a portable gathering machine over there with detection and measuring functions. He also told her to feel free to take whatever weapon she liked and to use them well. Pee-wee grabbed Bamman's shoulder and asked why he was going so far. Bamman ignored him and asked Satsuki if she had any objections. She answered that there was none and was let off. Back on the ship, Pee-wee asked his captain if letting her go like that was okay. Bamman answered in the affirmative. As Satsuki said, there was no risk for them. Instead, there was a higher chance of her failing, and on top of that, it was not a bad deal. They don't have to work, and they get to add the Ajapper she collected to their quota. This means that they get to bring back results that exceed their quota. If they do that, they'll be praised by the president and get promoted. And so they decided to enjoy their last year there by going on a tour of the planet Earth. Satsuki was dropped off back at the place where they were taken. She watched the sky, holding onto Sasaki's towel, before muttering for Sasaki to wait for her, and that she'd definitely save him. And so, Satsuki's days fighting aliens began. Using the weird machine she borrowed from them, she went around finding aliens and beating them all up regardless of their size or value. At the same time, the number of alien sightings and incidents increased in various parts of the world, and encounters with the unknown became less rare. 5 months later, in the present day, Satsuki was tired after just finishing fighting off an alien. She was worried about the sudden increase in their numbers recently. After she began fighting aliens, she realized 2 things. 1, her Ajapper value has been increasing. They said the Ajapper value doesn't always equal combat power, but she's been getting stronger the more she fights. The other thing was that the machine and weapon she borrowed from them were special. This weird club's hardness and weight don't match. Even though it was super hard, it was as light as a plastic bat. It was amazing. But the harder she swings it, the more she feels drained. Her body ends up feeling really heavy. She's assuming that the output of her Ajapper is proportional to the bat's power. So the higher the Ajapper, the higher the weapon's capacity and power. Her thoughts drifted to Sasaki, wondering if he could destroy the planet if he used it. She sniffed, always ending up thinking of him. The alien she had just defeated had 188 Ajapper. She pressed on the portable gathering machine to check how many more Ajapper she still needed to collect. It showed that her total remaining Ajapper was 117,245. She threw the gathering machine in frustration. It had gone up. Satsuki was so pissed off at Bamman scamming her, a high schooler, and questioned whether she was in quicksand debt. It's already been 5 months. How was she supposed to get enough? She flinched when she suddenly heard the cops coming, so she quickly escaped and jumped out, leaving the alien corpse behind. She entered her place, put her bag down, and removed the towel wrapped around her neck. It was Sasaki's towel that he had given to her. She glanced at the picture frame and announced her arrival. The woman in the picture was her mom. In the fall of 9th grade, her mother suddenly passed away from cancer. She was an alien-like person. She remembered her mom's emotionless expression when she asked if she had talked to any boys that day. When she answered no, her mom just told her to let her know who she talked with and what they talked about if ever she did. Satsuki's mother changed when she was 7 years old after her father left them for a younger woman. Her mother, who would talk about fidelity at every opportunity she got, taught her martial arts and thoroughly educated her on how to be a woman. Contrary to her mother's will, her interest in romance grew, and every time her mother found traces of her interest, she would become very disappointed and scold her. However, Satsuki never once thought that her mother was scary. She pitied her. When her mother married her father, her grandparents were all excited that she married into money. The reason why she silently accepted such strategic gazes and behaved as expected was because her mother had no choice but to do as Satsuki's grandmother taught her. But she thinks that her mother actually loved her father. That's why her only option was to keep up appearances to her father's betrayal. Satsuki lit a candle before muttering a prayer and telling her mother she'd avenge her. She won't give up on love. She won't lose to love. Never. The next day, Satsuki lay on a bench, holding the portable gathering machine. She looked exhausted. Her best friend, Natsuko, who coincidentally saw her, asked what she was doing in a place like this, but instead of answering, she asked what about Natsuko. Natsuko answered she was running laps around the perimeter, and Satsuki talked about both of them working hard in the cold, even though the rest of the world was enjoying the Christmas season. Natsuko sat next to her and asked if she was feeling down. Satsuki didn't reply, and Natsuko thought she shouldn't be surprised since her boyfriend was missing. Satsuki finally spoke and asked what she thought she was missing right now. Natsuko hesitatingly asked if it was her love, Sasaki. Satsuki answered in affirmation. But to sum it up, it's the irreplaceable time of youth a girl spends with her lover, that bittersweet feeling. Although Satsuki had already summed it up, Natsuko complained that it was still too long. Not minding her complaint, Satsuki continued to speak, saying this time won't ever come back. Natsuko stood up and told her to cheer up and that she'd treat her to a barbecue on Christmas. Satsuki thanked her but said it was okay since Sasaki might come back. Natsuko commented on how Satsuki was positive he'd return and looked at her in annoyance before stretching. She meant she'd treat her whether he comes back or not. Natsuko smiled and bid her goodbye, reminding her not to catch a cold. Satsuki finally sat up, watching Natsuko jog away. Her expression was determined as she thanked Natsuko and strengthened her resolve. She began tapping on the portable gathering machine and looked for her next target. However, it beeped, saying it was at the location she was in. She raised the device in annoyance, questioning its accuracy and whether it was trying to act like Google Maps on a bad day. She looked down, noticing an eyeball attached to the cat's belly. She tensed up, tapping on the device to check its adjapper. It showed that the eyeball had 15,327 adjapper. The cat ran away, frightened at Satsuki, who ran behind to catch it. She couldn't believe it had been under her nose this whole time. She had to catch that one. It had 15,327 adjapper. She gasped and realized that if she got this one to tell her the whereabouts of its friends and beat them all up, she might be able to pay the remainder in one go. And then, she'd be able to see Sasaki. With a crazed expression, Satsuki ran after the cat faster. However, a giant bird carrying a person suddenly flew past her. Her eyes widened in surprise as she looked back to check and convinced herself it wasn't what she thought it was. It must be a mistake that the person she saw the bird carrying was the unconscious Natsuko. She was smiling, but she had tears in her eyes. It seemed she was trying hard to convince herself. The giant bird stopped at a hill, picking up the unconscious Natsuko. He salivated, muttering about the delicious meat of the earthlings, especially the females. They have just the right softness. Its mouth opened, preparing to swallow Natsuko. Just then, Satsuki attacked the giant bird, releasing Natsuko. The giant bird was pushed back, and Satsuki landed on the ground. He glared at her as she grabbed Natsuko, holding a bat in defense. She spoke to the unconscious Natsuko, saying she better treat her to that barbecue. She laid Natsuko down on the grass and stood before her, facing the giant bird. The drooling bird angrily shouted at her for getting in the way of his meal. He then noticed something before holding his head and cursing. He was trembling as he shouted how he was so lucky. To think that he can eat two delicious-looking women. Today was the best day. He cheered and attacked Satsuki with his claw. Satsuki jumped up, dodging the attack. However, it was able to release another attack while Satsuki was dodging, injuring her. She landed on the ground, realizing its speed. It's different from the ones she's been fighting before. The giant bird laughed, saying Satsuki dodged well since he didn't want to cover her in wounds. Satsuki continued to dodge the giant bird's attacks narrowly. However, it was no good. She can't do anything unless she gets closer to it. She started to remember her mother's words in the past. While lying in the hospital bed, her mother talked about the things she said to Satsuki, but she didn't remember telling Satsuki not to fall in love. Satsuki answered that she knew. Her mother advised her that she must give it her all if she finds someone important to her in the future and truly thinks she would like to live the rest of her life with them. Face them with everything she got. While doing so, there was something she shouldn't forget about: the people around her. She shouldn't indulge in one person or one feeling. She should always stay in control of herself and adhere to her principles. That was true fidelity. Back to the present, Satsuki stood determinedly before quickly dodging the giant bird's attack. However, he was able to grab her leg. The giant bird lifted her, saying he got her. He opened his mouth, planning to eat Satsuki first. Satsuki apologetically glanced over at Natsuko. She started to remember their memories and apologized for forgetting what Natsuko had done for her. She thought about her friend's words earlier before gritting her teeth and fighting back. She grabbed the bird's lower teeth and placed her feet on the upper part of its mouth, trying to stop it from eating her. Then, she straightened her crouching body, forcefully snapping the giant bird's jaw. Satsuki escaped and landed back on the ground while the bird wailed in pain. He angrily shouted at her, complaining how he wouldn't be able to chew properly for a while. Satsuki told him to shut up, picking a round orb inside her back. She tossed it, saying it won't be just for a while and not to ever hit humans again. She hit the orb with the bat, and it hit the giant bird's head. Its head exploded, and only its eyeball remained. After the absorption was complete, the portable gathering machine showed 837 Ajapper. Satsuki was surprised and cheered that the alien she fought had a pretty high number. At that moment, Natsuko woke up and called out to Satsuki, asking what was going on. The nervous Satsuki fidgeted and tried to come up with an excuse. That lousy excuse was that she had come for a little picnic and just happened to see Natsuko passed out there. Natsuko didn't really get it, but knew that Satsuki had saved her, so she thanked her. Satsuki finally smiled and told her she had changed her mind and wanted Natsuko to treat her to barbecue, to which Natsuko agreed. Satsuki started thinking of her mom while happily walking back with Natsuko. What her mom taught her took root inside her, and she vowed to stick to it until she got everything back. There was 590 Ajapper left until she could get her boyfriend back. 27 hours ago, an alien corpse that Satsuki defeated was rotting on a building's rooftop. The person wondered what was up with the messy corpse. It was an unnatural external wound that seemed as if they made it rupture from the inside. It was probably related to the other strange alien corpses that have been found in those parts. The other person picked up some of the remains with a black glove in his hand, complaining about them having to clean it up. A short-haired woman stood, holding a tablet. The man wearing a black coat commented that a wannabe hero was out there. It was another day for Satsuki to go out for a quick hunt. Holding the club, she followed the location shown in the portable gathering machine. She walked inside an alley and noticed an alien with a bunch of eyes stuck on the ceiling. She readied her club and prepared to fight. She'll be able to meet her wonderful boyfriend if she beats those things up. Aliens. Until now, they were only a figment of human imagination. However, they actually exist and are lurking about on the planet. She was abducted by an alien, and her precious lover was taken from her. The condition to get him back was to collect the same amount of Ajapper or energy value that he has and hand it over to the Kumdran people. It's been almost half a year since then. The state of the world has completely changed, and the existence of aliens has been acknowledged. After beating the alien, she connected her portable gathering machine and started absorbing the Ajapper of the alien corpse. While waiting, she remembered the Kumdran mentioning something similar. Bayman had said something about good news for her that may be bad news for Earthlings. But from here on out, the aliens that have been lurking on Earth may all become active. Satsuki asked him how he knew something like that, and Bayman answered that it was almost time for the Space King to manifest. Satsuki was confused and wanted to ask what he meant, but Bayman had already clicked the button to send her back. The falling Satsuki complained and asked him to tell her, but Bayman only laughed and bid her good luck. Well, she doesn't really care as long as she gets Sasaki back. After the absorption was completed, an Ajapper amounting to 217 appeared on the screen. It was lower than Satsuki thought. At that moment, someone appeared behind Satsuki, calling out her name. It was the short-haired woman and the man wearing a black coat. The woman greeted the anxious Satsuki and introduced themselves. She was Miyoshi, and the man next to her was Muto. They're from the Ground Defense Force under the Ministry of Defense and would like to ask Satsuki a few things, so it would be great if she came with them. Inside one of the rooms inside the Ground Defense Force's building, they interrogated Satsuki. Muto sat across her, crossing his arms, and asked if that was the reason she was fighting aliens. Satsuki nervously responded in affirmation. Muto didn't believe her story. Even if he was using a weapon made by aliens, he couldn't believe a high school kid like her was the one brutally killing all those aliens. Miyoshi, swinging the bat, informed Muto about the amazing weapon. She wondered what it was made of since it was super light. He asked how Satsuki used the bat, saying that swinging it couldn't make minced meat out of those aliens. Satsuki answered that she really just swings it. The stronger she swings, whatever it hits goes boom from the inside. Miyoshi froze upon hearing that, but Satsuki continued, explaining that for some reason, the higher the power, the more tired she felt. Muto, who seemed to not believe her, also did not understand the thing about the Ajapper since even the Defense Force hadn't uncovered the existence of that energy, and Satsuki responded that there was no use telling her that. He asked if humans could use the weird measuring instrument, the portable gathering machine. After hearing Satsuki's confirmation, he asked what her Ajapper number was. Satsuki replied that it was about 370 the last time she checked. Muto found it interesting and ordered to be scanned. The three waited for the machine to scan him. After it beeped, he asked what it said, and she answered that it was 285 Ajapper. After hearing that, Miyoshi glanced at him, but Muto just continued talking to Satsuki. He assured her they'd gotten a general idea of her situation and goal, ignoring Miyoshi in the back, who questioned how he could possibly lose to Satsuki. Muto continued and said what they had to say. He explained that civilians are not allowed to fight aliens for personal reasons, and that the military will keep the measuring instrument in custody. He then ordered Miyoshi to take both the measuring instrument and weapon to the laboratory next door. Satsuki interjected, asking for an explanation. Muto explained that subduing aliens was the Defense Force's job, and that she should leave her boyfriend's situation to them and just wait for an update. Satsuki stood up, smacking the table, and angrily shouted about how much trouble she had gone through these 6 months to gather Ajapper. In the first place, this all happened because they were useless. Her boyfriend was abducted, her best friend almost got eaten, and it was all their fault. Satsuki wasn't able to finish her sentence as Muto cut her off, asking if it was the police's fault if someone got murdered, and told her if yelling at them was going to make her feel better, then she was free to do so. Muto opened a drawer and took out a stack of paper. It was a pile of apology letters. Those were all to deal with the corpses of the aliens she killed. He informed her that the weapon she was using was dangerous as well. It falls under the law against using explosives. To begin with, the Defense Force has the custodial rights to items collected from aliens. Satsuki asked if it was really such a bad thing. She was just fighting for someone important to her. He responded that if it were fine for individuals to act on their own sense of justice freely, their country wouldn't need laws or the police. Muto told her he'd turn a blind eye to all of it and let her go home. But if she fought back, even if she ran away from them, the Defense Force would go after her for the rest of her life. Satsuki's tears started to fall, questioning why the world would not let her save the one she loved. She reminisced about the first time she met Sasaki. He was walking down the stairs, saw her inside the trash can, and asked whether she was getting bullied. She answered no, explaining that she just tripped. Sasaki was surprised and went to help her. After he helped her clean up the mess, he returned the broom to the storage. Satsuki thanked him, and Sasaki replied that it was no problem, and that it was kind of funny. He told her he was glad she wasn't hurt before walking away. The blushing Satsuki called out his attention and asked for his name. Back to the present, Satsuki wiped her tears and apologized before asking if they could let her be alone. Muto replied that there was a bench in the hallway and that she could do what she liked there. Before sending her out, Muto asked her to leave the portable gathering machine she was holding. She quietly placed it on the table and left the room, curling up on the bench outside while crying. Inside the room, Miyoshi asked Muto if he was okay. His hand trembled as he held the cup of coffee. She glanced at it and pointed out that he hadn't been able to hide the fact that he felt bad making a high school girl cry. She nagged at him, asking what was up with him, saying to leave the device there. Did he really think she would just run away with it? Was he trying to say that her crying was all part of an act? She questioned if Muto could not even see through that, and ended it by calling him a typical unpleasant adult. Miyoshi sighed, saying the military always ignored its own faults. It was true that they were useless. Muto silently sipped on his coffee, his hand still trembling, before asking Miyoshi to send Satsuki back home. She complained and asked him not to leave everything to her. Muto responded that it was easier for women to back each other up. Miyoshi sighed and started walking out the door, teasing him about how she'd clean up after her useless boss. Muto frowned and glared at her, telling her to shut up and go. Before stepping out of the room, Miyoshi spoke again. She thinks that the one who can actually understand Satsuki's feelings is him. Muto didn't respond and seemed to be deep in thought. Miyoshi took Satsuki home. On their ride back, Miyoshi asked her if she had calmed down. Satsuki answered that yes, she had. She asked her not to worry. She may not trust them now, but they would definitely save her boyfriend. Satsuki asked if the Defense Force had been formed recently. Miyoshi responded, saying it was founded decades ago, but they've been getting noticed due to the sudden alien activity. They are responsible for investigations, subjugations, research, and work related to aliens. It was scary how much the country's been putting them through the paces. She was sure that Satsuki knew about it already, but she still explained the various types of aliens. Harmless ones that disguise themselves and stay hidden, those that teleport, those that turn invisible, those that don't have the ability to speak and look like bugs or fish, and those that abduct or attack humans. Even the ones that have been docile have suddenly begun to show themselves and go after people. Satsuki silently listened, and Miyoshi continued, saying that, as Satsuki said, it was true that they hadn't been able to get around to things. It took them time to find her and talk to her. She explained that Muto acted the way he did, but she was sure he felt responsible for making Satsuki run around like that. Satsuki finally spoke, saying she still hated him, and Miyoshi replied that she wouldn't deny her that. After they finally reached Satsuki's home, she exited the car and thanked Miyoshi. Miyoshi replied that it was no problem and apologized for dragging her around. Satsuki nervously held onto her skirt and apologized for the trouble she caused. She wasn't thinking properly about the dangers of the weapon or the things to do after defeating them. Miyoshi smiled and told her that being able to apologize makes her a better person than a certain someone. Miyoshi bid her goodnight, saying they'd let her know as soon as they found out something about the alien who abducted her boyfriend. Satsuki remembered something and asked if the reason behind the sudden alien activity recently was because of the Space King. Miyoshi was surprised and was about to ask where she had heard that name, but the telephone inside the car started ringing. She answered it and was soon shocked. It seemed something had happened in the laboratory. In the laboratory, Muto faced a giant squid with its brains visible. The giant squid attacked with its tentacle. Muto dodged and tried to counterattack with his blade, but it didn't cut through the giant squid's tentacle. He clicked his tongue and wondered about its abnormal rigidity because his blade wouldn't go through. The giant squid attacked using another tentacle, and Muto dodged and darted forward, screaming for it not to get too cocky, and landed a punch on one of its eyes. However, the giant squid's tentacles started to move again and wrapped around his extended arm. His attack had been too shallow. The giant squid swung him up using its tentacle and pushed him toward the wall. Muto grunted, raising his blade as the giant squid raised a tentacle to attack him again. However, a bullet suddenly hit the tentacle. Muto glanced in the direction of the bullet and saw Miyoshi crouching down with a gun in her hand. She asked what he was doing. Muto asked back where the researchers were. She answered that they'd all evacuated. He then asked where the backup was. Miyoshi was enraged and asked him to show a little more spine. He was a company commander, after all. At that moment, a tentacle suddenly attacked her, so she dodged. Muto told her to be careful as it's got really tough skin, and that she'll be in trouble if it gets a hold of her. Still dodging, Miyoshi answered that she could see that while shooting the tentacle. Muto informed her that ranged attacks wouldn't do much damage. She wouldn't be able to do much to it unless she gets as close as she can and uses a shotgun or something. The 2 bullets she shot hit the tentacles but didn't do much. So, she started running away, complaining that she was the wrong person for that kind of stuff. As she was running, tentacles appeared before and behind her, trapping her. Muto noticed and called out to Miyoshi in worry. Just then, a bat was thrown in the air and landed on the tentacles holding on to Miyoshi. The tentacle exploded, and the bat dropped to the floor. Satsuki has arrived, looking down at them from above. Miyoshi, who was now released, called out to Satsuki. Satsuki was panting as she told Miyoshi that she had found the weapon, although she had just thrown it. The still-binded Muto turned to Miyoshi and asked why she brought Satsuki. She replied that she had no choice. Satsuki told her that if the absorption machine were broken, then it would have all been for nothing, and that she'd come with her even if she died. She wouldn't listen to her. Muto called out to Satsuki and ordered her to leave. This was not something she'd be able to beat. Satsuki was angry and shouted back, saying not to judge her like that. Muto shouted that what he was saying was for her to take her absorption machine and get out of there because she'd die. The stubborn Satsuki shouted that there was no way she'd leave. She's the one who's going to beat that thing up. Muto watched her jump down and questioned why she was doing this. What was she fighting for? Satsuki panted while running before telling him he didn't seem very popular, so she'd tell him this. Women don't just cry because they're sad. She asked if he understood and continued shouting, saying she was pissed right now because every last one of them kept getting in the way of her romance. She doesn't care what happens to him, but while walking that path, if she ignores the people who've fallen, she feels like she'll lose something even more important. That's why she'll carry everything to her goal. It was what her mom taught her. It's what qualifies her to be with Sasaki. Muto stared at her and remembered his brother. When they were younger, he and his brother got chased by an alien, and his little brother begged him to let go of his hand. The crying Muto back then had no choice but to let go of his brother's hand and let him get eaten by the alien. Muto gritted his teeth after thinking of that painful memory and informed Satsuki that there was a limit to the giant squid's tentacles. He told her to go up above it. That was the opening. Satsuki quickly climbed the ladder and jumped onto the wires on the ceiling above the alien. She called out to Miyoshi, asking for her weapon. Miyoshi threw her weapon, and Satsuki grabbed it before jumping down on the brain. Muto remembered what Satsuki told him about her weapon and thought they might just be able to defeat it if it was her weapon. Satsuki landed, and her bat was stabbed in the brain. The two watched the brain expand instead of exploding. The three realized this, and Miyoshi muttered that the impact wasn't strong enough. Satsuki raised her head and hit the bat's hilt with her forehead, adding more impact. The brain finally exploded and disappeared without a trace. The two held their hands in defense due to the explosion's impact. Satsuki stood up and walked over to the collapsed Muto, asking him how it felt getting rescued by the high school girl he made cry. Muto had a blank expression before calling her crazy, thinking she was a mad dog. It was lunch break at school, and Netsuko called out to Satsuki, asking what she was drinking. Satsuki answered that it was protein, and Netsuko asked where her lunch was. Satsuki slurped on the straw and said that was it. Netsuko commented that watching her only drink protein for lunch felt weird. After the fierce battle against the alien that attacked the Defense Forces laboratory, she used up all her energy and crashed on the spot in the blink of an eye. She wasn't sure if it was because of the concussion from the headbutt or from the sudden fatigue after using the weapon. She was hospitalized for a day, and once they knew that there was nothing wrong with her, she was sent home by the military. When she woke up the next day, it was just like any other day, just like it was 6 months ago. No, the difference was that Sasaki wasn't there. Thinking about it now, everything felt like a dream the day the Khamdrans abducted her, and those days spent fighting aliens. Everything felt like a really long dream. Everything, even Sasaki's existence, no, she wasn't going to be all wistful like that. Satsuki had a determined look while Natsuko looked at her in confusion. The military ended up taking the absorption machine and weapon from her, so she couldn't fight aliens anymore. But that doesn't matter. She just needed to train a lot and pay them back with her own edgeapper. She's not giving up on him. While walking out of the school gate, someone called out for Satsuki. It was Miyoshi with Muto. Satsuki glared at Muto, and he just looked back at her before saying that sushi was delicious. Satsuki was horrified. Miyoshi explained what he meant. Muto meant to thank her for saving him the other day, apologize for making her cry, and let him treat her to some sushi as an apology. Muto turned his back and walked away, informing her they'd pick her up tonight, so she should be home. Miyoshi waved her hand and bid goodbye before leaving. The two high school girls just watched them walk away. Natsuko asked who that was, and Satsuki replied that he was a useless old man. Natsuko mumbled that he might be her type, and Satsuki looked at her in confusion. Later that evening, they arrived at a sushi place. The man next to her, Muto, informed her that they had talked to upper management, but they still couldn't give her the absorption machine or the weapon back, and they couldn't give her the green light for her personal alien hunt. Satsuki angrily stood up and complained that she should be getting the approval now because she had saved him, questioning whether he really was useless. Muto asked her to hear him out till the end. He explained that her actions and possession of weapons as a civilian are a problem. However, aside from that, they've determined she's in a very special position. Satsuki tilted her head in confusion, asking what he meant by that. Miyoshi explained that Satsuki had come in contact with aliens and had even negotiated and made a deal with one. This means she's not simply a victim. Rather, she's a very rare Earthling who's formed a business relationship with an alien. Satsuki questioned whether she was trying to say that Satsuki was a human on the alien side. Miyoshi waved her hands and denied. Muto said the military hasn't done enough research on aliens yet, so they want more information on that edgeapper thing. Miyoshi added that although unintentional, Satsuki being someone who's able to contact the Khamdran alien can be a strong bargaining point. Satsuki asked what the bargaining point was for. Miyoshi answered that the only way for her to get approval to collect edgeapper while keeping her on the government side was to have her join the military. The next day, she lit a candle and talked to her mom. She stared at her mom's picture before telling her that she was going to join the military. Romance was so difficult. Everyone was getting in her way. How troublesome. But there was someone who reached out to her. She bid her mom goodbye and left with her luggage. Satsuki, along with Miyoshi and Muto, arrived at the military's headquarters. Satsuki looked at the building with a determined expression. Miyoshi called out to Satsuki, but she raised her hand to stop her, saying it was okay and that she knew. Miyoshi just looked at her in confusion. Satsuki was invited by some adults she had just met the other day, and she stepped onto the grounds of an unfamiliar organization. This meant there was an enlistment exam. However, Miyoshi told her there wasn't one. She looked back in confusion, and Miyoshi waved her hand, explaining that there wasn't one because Satsuki was already pretty strong, so there was no need for her to take an exam. She asked Muto to confirm what she said, and Muto did, evaluating that Satsuki was at least at the level of a platoon leader. Miyoshi responded that she was pretty sure Satsuki was a lot stronger than him. Muto denied it and continued to speak, saying that, in any case, the number of military personnel is still small. In particular, the ground vanguard units are undermanned to the point where they're recruiting volunteers from the self-defense forces. That was enough if she was prepared to put her life on the line. And Satsuki was stronger than him, Miyoshi added, teasing Muto. He denied it again and told Satsuki that once she signed the contract, she'd be in before asking Miyoshi to take Satsuki to the dorms. Miyoshi replied that she was already planning on doing that. Miyoshi led Satsuki to their dorm room, where Satsuki signed the contract. Miyoshi stared at her, and when Satsuki noticed this, she asked her what it was. Miyoshi flinched and apologized. She just thought Satsuki was incredible. She'd been fighting aliens by herself to save her boyfriend, but because she wasn't allowed to do that, she ended up having to join such a dangerous organization. Satsuki asked if she pitied her. Miyoshi answered yes and asked if she really was okay with this. If she were to rip up the contract now, she won't say anything, was what Miyoshi wanted to say, but Satsuki cut her off, firmly saying she won't rip it, and she'll do anything to get Sasaki back. Just then, the door opened, and Muto entered, asking if they were done because they'd be seeing the Supreme Commander. He had to stop when he saw Miyoshi crying. He asked Satsuki why Miyoshi was crying, but Satsuki didn't know either. Miyoshi cried, shouting she was moved by Satsuki's pure love and wished she could have loved someone like that. She grunted, wanting to fall in love before wondering why she was still fighting aliens at the age of 24. She then saluted Satsuki, welcoming her to the defense force. Satsuki just smiled at her actions. Muto interjected and informed her they were going to see the Supreme Commander. He asked Miyoshi if she had told Satsuki. Miyoshi responded that she hadn't and that he should do it. Muto crossed his arms and said it would be faster if she saw. He turned to Satsuki and told her not to be weird about it. They finally arrived at the master room to see the Supreme Commander. Muto called out to the commander, reporting they had brought the new recruit with them. The Supreme Commander thanked Muto before turning his chair around to face them. When the chair turned, an alien sat there. He was Yamagata, the Supreme Commander of the Defense Force. Satsuki was horrified at the scene in front of her. Keimitsu Yamagata was a genius. He was the youngest child of the Yamagata family, a family of bureaucrats, and he performed very well academically, to the point where he graduated from one of the top universities early, when he was 17. However, the adults around him wanted him to remain a prodigy because a genius can't be won over. For example, an ordinary person wouldn't casually take care of a cryptid they find in their house. He took one and named it Sticky. For example, they wouldn't treat a cryptid like a friend and spill their guts to them. That creature didn't have vocal cords, but somehow understood human language. Some or 2 years later, Keimitsu Yamagata was severely injured and in critical condition. The doctors came to the conclusion that the damage was due to falling while on a walk, but they were actually protecting Sticky from someone. Using its own body, Sticky tried to stitch up his injuries. However, it was unlikely that he would recover. Once Sticky understood that fusion would only save his body and not his life, Sticky stopped. But there was something else he could take over, aside from his body. That was his will. What his favorite phrase, "He will change the country with his actions," meant, and how it was supposed to take shape in the future could have remained a mystery. However, the Earthling had taken action to save it, and taking action is how Sticky took over his will and body. Satsuki asked if this had been about him all along, and if he was an alien. She pointed to him, confirming he wasn't an alien-faced human, but was sticky inside and out. Muto scolded her for being rude while the Supreme Commander gave a thumbs up, confirming he was sticky both inside and out. The Supreme Commander continued his story, saying his existence was hidden. Thanks to his painstaking efforts and the Yamagata's connections, he was able to make his way into politics. He managed to create a small army under the condition of it being strictly for defense against aliens, and he was now acting as the Super Commander as Keimitsu Yamagata. It was a slipshod ending. After finishing his story, he called out to Satsuki. He apologized for making her go through such hardship due to their incompetence and thanked her for giving them a helping hand. As she already knows, Earth and Japan are about to face unprecedented danger. A horde of aliens may set countless cities ablaze in a not-so-far-off future. The root of all these evils is the Space King. The Space King's existence is surrounded by mysteries and only spoken of through rumors. It is said that the Space King has been wandering through the galaxy since time immemorial. That is why the information on the Space King is limited, but they currently know 3 facts. 1. The Space King holds a vast amount of energy. 2. The Space King has something to do with the increase in alien activity. And 3. It was likely that the Space King would appear in Japan soon. Satsuki remembered what Baman told her and informed them that the Kumdrans also said the same thing. She then asked to confirm if she was permitted to join because she was able to contact them. She explained that she doesn't have a way to get in touch with them from her end, so she doesn't think they should have high expectations. The Supreme Commander, Yamagata, told her that wasn't the only reason. Her strength, will, and good intentions are all things they seek, so they would like her to lend them strength and help her save her loved one. Yamagata was sure Satsuki was tired from all the explanations, so he sent her back to her dorm to rest. Back in the dorm, Satsuki asked Miyoshi, who was blow-drying her hair, why an alien was acting as head honcho of the military. Miyoshi answered that it was as the commander said. However, Satsuki still wasn't convinced. Miyoshi said she was also surprised at first, but Commander Yamagata is very compassionate and trustworthy. She handed Satsuki her uniform since they had a mission tomorrow and informed her about the general rule, to keep her uniform and equipment by her bedside so she'll be ready to go anytime. Miyoshi climbed the ladder to her bed and wished Satsuki a good night. The next day, Muto saluted to a soldier outside the vehicle they would be riding while the other two were nearby. Satsuki observed her uniform and asked Miyoshi why it was a little different from hers. Miyoshi answered that it was because she joined as a special member, and it was made for her so the others could tell who she was at a glance. She then asked Satsuki about the towel around her neck. Satsuki responded that the towel was her boyfriend's, Sasaki. Miyoshi cheered for her, saying she definitely needed to see him again and give it back to him. Satsuki had the same determined expression while agreeing. Muto walked over to them, handing Satsuki her weapon and measuring machine. She took them and asked Muto why, and if he really was giving them to her. Muto walked towards the vehicle and answered that he had the laboratory give it, or rather, they gave it back. It wouldn't boot up, so they weren't able to do any research on it. They said there may be some sort of built-in authentication system, so humans other than Satsuki can't use it. He stepped inside the vehicle, telling her not to misunderstand. He hasn't approved of her using those things carelessly. However, since she joined, it's best she can pull out all the stops when she goes on missions. That was all, and he slammed the door shut. Miyoshi snickered and whispered to Satsuki that Muto was definitely trying to act cool. While traveling to their destination, Satsuki asked where they were heading. Miyoshi, who had a laptop on her lap showing a map, answered that they were heading to Tobacco Village, a settlement deep in the mountains. While listening, Satsuki thought she felt like she had heard of Tobacco Village somewhere before. Miyoshi continued to explain the situation to her. Villagers have been disappearing one after another these past few days. There are no bears in this region, which means there's a high chance that an alien is the cause. Muto, who was driving, informed them they'll start investigating as soon as they arrive. Then they'll subdue them. They talked about it before they left. Satsuki apologized, saying her back was starting to hurt. Miyoshi spoke to Muto. Subjugation aside, she felt like the police could at least do the investigation part. Their hands are full with trying to get information on the Space King. Muto told her not to complain, saying the defense force was in charge of everything related to aliens. Satsuki interjected and said there was something she's been thinking about since the commander's talk yesterday. If they want to know more about the Space King, shouldn't they just catch aliens out there and ask them? Muto responded that capturing them is harder than subjugating them. To begin with, it's rare for an alien to be capable of speech. Satsuki was confused and asked if that was really the case, and Miyoshi answered that it was. Muto called out to Satsuki, asking if any came to mind aside from the Chondrans. She thought of the giant bird that almost ate Natsuko before gasping as she had killed that one. Satsuki nervously waved her hand and replied that she didn't remember any. The two just looked at her in confusion. Muto changed the subject and ordered Miyoshi to give Satsuki the information on the suspect. Miyoshi agreed and turned her laptop towards Satsuki, showing her a photo of the suspect, an alien. The alien is from the planet Hamaho. This alien has been marked as the suspect based on the tricks they've used in the past. The Hamaho aliens like to make their nests near their hunting grounds, and the pack organizes by assigning roles to each individual. Satsuki asked for their number, and Miyoshi answered that it would depend on the size of the nest, but there are usually 20 or 30 of them. Muto warned Satsuki not to underestimate them even though they looked emaciated. They're highly intelligent and cunning and attack humans even if they aren't capable of speech. He informed her of a platoon facing them in the past and getting completely wiped out. Satsuki stared at the alien's photo, thinking it had a weird face. In the forest near Tobacco Village, a voice could be heard from a communication device, asking if the one holding the device was listening. The alien holding the device answered that he was thinking and threatened to kill the other individual on the line. The other individual on the line calmed him down, saying he snapped way too easily, and asked him to remain undercover for now and find the target. The alien, who killed a Hamaho alien, holding its leg, listened silently. The voice reminded the alien to avoid fighting as much as possible and not to leave any traces behind, and let him know immediately if anything happens. The alien with long hair and shoulder pads with spikes responded that he understood. Upon arriving in Tobacco Village, the villagers disdainfully looked at the three. The old man in front told them they were late. It's been 2 days since the first villager disappeared and complained about them taking their time. Muto apologized. However, another man accused them of not caring how many people died in the countryside. The police said something along the lines of alien crimes is out of their jurisdiction and just left in the middle of their investigation, and when they thought someone was finally coming to help, there were just 3 of them. An old woman commented about how one of them was just a child, pointing at Satsuki. Miyoshi asked them to calm down and informed them they already had a suspect in mind. The suspected alien isn't one to immediately harm or kill humans they've abducted. They're known for their habit of taking their prey back to their nest and then keeping them there for some time. As of right now, they have yet to find any traces of villagers being injured or their corpses, so they don't know if anyone was actually dead. However, Miyoshi couldn't finish her sentence. The old woman cut her off, asking how they could be so sure and how they planned on taking responsibility if someone was killed because they took their time. For starters, they haven't even done a proper investigation. The old man informed them that a total of 8 people were missing from Tobacco Village today. 6 adults and 2 children. He told them that even if a single villager loses their life, he won't forgive them. Muto said he understood and that they would definitely save them. Satsuki just quietly watched Muto calmly responding to the villagers. They entered the forest and started investigating. Muto commented on how big the forest was and told them they had to split up as it would get dark soon. Miyoshi responded that she'd like to get more evidence before they do that. And once they find traces of a Hamaho alien, they'll split up and search for their nest. Muto informed her they wouldn't build their nest on the west side because of the climb they would have to make in that mountain region. Miyoshi agreed, and they continued talking. Satsuki just watched them, not knowing what to do. She's got absolutely no motivation to do her job. Of course, she wants to save the victims, and she can't forgive aliens. She understands that this was work. But what was up with those villagers? It was true that they arrived late, but they didn't really have to say it like that. They're about to put their lives on the line to fight aliens. It was no good if they all acted like that everywhere. She'll end up joining the dark side. She won't, but still. She thought of how mature Muto and Miyoshi were. They didn't even frown. Working adults are so admirable. She remembered saying some mean things back then, too. Muto called out to her and asked if she was listening. Satsuki flinched and got back from her thoughts. She then bowed and apologized for what happened back then. Muto took out a radio transceiver, saying they didn't have much time, and ordered them to split up and focus on investigating the east side. He told them to use the radio transceiver to keep in touch. They must report immediately if they find anything. He handed Satsuki the radio transceiver and asked if she knew how to use it. Satsuki answered yes while reaching for it. However, before she could grab it, something appeared behind her. They flinched and looked towards it. It was a Hamaho alien. With a determined expression, Satsuki ran after the Hamaho alien that ran away. Muto called for Satsuki, but she never looked back. Muto complained about Satsuki being an idiot. She didn't even take the transceiver with her. Miyoshi said she was sure Satsuki won't have any problems fighting it since she was strong, but it was odd. Muto agreed since Hamaho aliens use trees to keep themselves hidden while they move around during the day. They don't run on the ground in the open like that. They wondered if the Hamaho aliens were being chased by something. Above them, the alien with long hair and shoulder pads with spikes stood on one of the tree's branches, watching them from above. On the other hand, Satsuki was still chasing the Hamaho alien that ran away. She noticed the running Hamaho alien suddenly stop, so she jumped, took her bat out, and swung it toward him. However, the cunning alien dodged and dashed to the side. Satsuki wasn't able to hit it and just now noticed the cliff. There was no way of stopping her body in midair, so she fell. The Hamaho alien watched her fall, and she couldn't help but be pissed off. She fell down the cliff and was unconscious before waking up inside a cave. She got up, and the kid watching her was startled. She noticed the kid and asked who he was and what he was doing. The kid who was about to ask the same things finally shouted to let him ask first. However, Satsuki ignored it and continued talking. She grabbed him by the shoulder, shaking him, and asked if he was one of the kids from Tobacco Village. She told him the forest was dangerous at the moment, so he should return to their village. The kid asks her if she knows she's actually the one who got saved just now. Satsuki continued talking, informing him that an alien from the planet Hamaho had been abducting villagers, so they had to go. However, before she could finish her sentence, the kid turned back, removing her grip on his shoulders. He exclaimed that he knew. They had escaped from its nest. He asked if she was one of the military people and complained that they were late. Satsuki realized that he was one of the missing children. The kid disregarded her, saying a kid like Satsuki wouldn't be of any help, and told her to go back to their base. Satsuki was pissed off at the fact that the person telling her that was also a kid. She then grabbed the shoulder of the kid to stop him from walking away and asked him where he was going. The kid said he was returning to the nest because he had to save everyone else. Satsuki grabbed him tighter, saying she couldn't let him do that. The kid grabbed her arm and told her to shut up and let go of him, calling her useless. Satsuki asked him to calm down for a second and said she'd contact her superior. She patted around her uniform, trying to find the transceiver. However, she couldn't find it and cried, telling the kid she didn't have a way to contact him. The kid started to walk away again, and Satsuki grabbed him, saying he should definitely go back to the village. The kid shouted that he couldn't. He had to save them. Satsuki lightly hit his head and asked him to wait. She fixed the weapon around her and asked if he knew where the nest was. If so, she'll be his guard, and asked him not to act recklessly. The kid held his head, thinking how casually she had hit him. She added that if he wasn't around, she's gonna get lost. The kid questioned whether she really worked for the government. The kid led him out of the cave, and they were met with the sea. The kid noticed she wasn't following him and asked what she was doing since it was that way. Satsuki exclaimed that she remembered now. The place they were in was where Waves with You was filmed. The kid asked what Waves with You was, and Satsuki answered that it's a romance TV series called The Waves I Heard With You That Day Still Won't Leave My Mind, a 15-day diary of a teenage romance between an air-headed girl and a straight-laced boy. The kid commented that it was a long title. Satsuki finally realized why she recognized Tobacco Village. There was no mistake. She finally found her motivation to do the job and vowed to protect the village. Muto walked around the forest and noticed something was off when he came across the detached head of a Hamaho alien. He wondered who could have done it. It was not Satsuki because she went the other way. Muto panicked and reached out to Miyoshi through the transceiver. Miyoshi was panting as she headed back to the village. Walking through a thicket sure tires someone out. She complained about the sense of futility of retracing one's steps, and how dare her boss, Muto, do that to her. Earlier, Muto had told her to head back to the village and guard the villagers. He caught sight of the culprits, but things were a bit off in the forest. Miyoshi questioned whether he'd searched their nest by himself and whether he was out of his mind. It'll get dark, and he just said that they didn't have much time. Muto responded they still had enough time before the Hamaho aliens harmed the captured villagers. He doesn't even want to consider it, but the situation may already have progressed into something they can't deal with on their own, so one of them should be able to contact the outside to get the place guarded. Miyoshi continued walking, thinking it would be faster if they split up to search the nest and wishing she could change Muto's hard-hittedness. Suddenly, she heard a footstep nearby and turned towards the sound. Miyoshi was relieved it was just a deer, saying it spooked her out. She leaned on the tree behind her, hoping Satsuki was okay and that she hadn't fallen off a cliff or got distracted. Just then, the long-haired alien loomed behind the tree Miyoshi was leaning on. Back to Muto, who was getting nervous because Miyoshi wasn't answering him. He decided to head down for now since it'll get dark soon. However, he soon stopped in his tracks, noticing the Hamaho aliens watching him from above. He realized he must almost be at the den since they didn't want him to head in further. He took his coat off and unsheathed his blades, challenging the Hamaho aliens to come at him. Meanwhile, Satsuki kept talking about waves with you while they walked. She stopped and excitedly pointed to a shrine, talking about the scene where Hiroko runs after Koji and trips. The kid cut off her rambling and told her to shut up. He angrily shouted that if she was there to have fun, she should just leave. Even without them, he can save them on his own. Satsuki asked who he was talking about and why he was so worked up the whole time. She asked whether the one he was talking about was the other child victim. The kid didn't answer, so she asked whether it was a boy or a girl. The kind answered it didn't matter. Satsuki smirked, teasing the kid why he wouldn't tell her if it didn't matter. She asked if it was a girl, and upon seeing the kid's reaction, she continued to ask if she was older or younger, and if they were already dating before realizing they were too young. The kid then told her to shut up. Satsuki started to talk about her kind and cool boyfriend, Sasaki. The kid retorted that he didn't ask her, but Satsuki continued regardless. She told him about their promise to visit the film site of Waves with you together. To think she'd end up coming to the place by herself. She wants to come back again together. The kid glanced at her and asked why they didn't. Satsuki responded they couldn't because the aliens had abducted him. She shouted with determination that they'd definitely come here together one day. And for that reason, she'll protect this sacred place. She then grabbed the kid's shoulder and asked what he liked about them. The kid blushed, saying it wasn't like that. Satsuki teased him more, telling him not to lie when he was so red. The kid blushed harder, wondering what was wrong with a smirking Satsuki, and thought she would just hold him back. He told her to go home in annoyance since he could go alone from there. However, he couldn't finish his sentence when Satsuki flinched in shock and saw a Hamaho alien jump behind him, ready to attack. She told him to watch out and grabbed him before attacking the Hamaho alien with her bat. The kid looked back in shock at the Hamaho alien that exploded. Satsuki wondered if it was the one from earlier, but couldn't tell because they all looked the same. She then happily collected its A-Japper, saying it should be fine since she was the one who beat it. At the top of a cliff sat the long-haired alien. He was holding a communication device, asking the other line what he was supposed to do. Just when he thought the Hamaho's small fry got the target first, the wretched military also showed up. The other on the line asked if he made contact. He assured him not to worry because he only captured the woman who was alone and asked if he could kill her. The other line told him no because he couldn't leave any traces behind and scolded him about touching military personnel. He shouted not to be so scared of killing such an ant. The other line responded that he should not underestimate them because there are people stronger than him. He glared before laughing about a worthless earthling beating him. He then told the other line not to think they were in the same league, or he'd kill him. The other line disregarded his threat and returned to talking about the subject. Their target should be in the Hamaho den. He doesn't need to do anything besides plotting how to retrieve the target. He'll sum up the traits one more time, so he should remember them well. At the same time, while walking, Satsuki listened to the kid who told her about his childhood friend who single-handedly took large risks to get him out of that nest. So, he had to save her. Meanwhile, the long-haired alien listened to the other line, describing their target. It was an earthling around 10 years old, and a girl with chestnut-colored hair. He held the communication device and listened to the other line that told him to contact him immediately if anything happened. Hearing the silence, the other line asked what was wrong and ordered it answered. The alien answered it didn't come to Earth to sneak around. He came to rampage without restraint. He's had enough of the pesky stealth missions. He's killing every single villager and warrior. On the other hand, Muto continued to fight with the Hamaho aliens, cutting whatever his blade touched. He turned to a Hamaho alien who tried to ambush him from the side. Muto countered the attack with his elbow, breaking its wrist. He then attacked him with his blade, cutting his head. With 2 blades, he continued to cut the incoming Hamaho aliens. It's okay. Muto is strong. But there are a lot more than he expected. They keep popping up. With sweat trickling down his forehead, he questioned how many of them were there. At the cliff, the alien angrily broke the communication device and complained about how that weakling on the other line gave him roundabout orders. He figured it was fine as long as the ones who saw him didn't exist. In other words, he just needed to kill everyone in the village and wondered why the idiot on the other line didn't think of it. Finding the nest could wait, so he decided to deal with the military first. He turned to look at Miyoshi, whom he captured, but she was no longer there. Miyoshi was panting as she ran away, panicking. She wondered what that thing was, as it was the first time she'd seen a talking alien. He kept talking about killing, and it was definitely dangerous. However, he's really stupid. He thought that she'd actually fainted without even bothering to check. There should be a spare radio in the truck, so she should hurry back to the village and tell Muto about what she had witnessed. Meanwhile, Satsuki walked with the kid while killing the Hamaho aliens they encountered along the way. She slid the bat back to its compartment and asked about the increased amount of the Hamaho aliens that appeared. The kid answered that it was probably because they were near the nest's entrance. Satsuki asked whether it was the west or east side of the village, to which the kid answered it was the west. Satsuki got worried because her superior, Muto, said they'd focus on searching the east side. The kid explained they have more than one entrance. There was a bunch of them, like mole holes, and the one they were heading to was closest to where the others were. That was why he was able to get out of there so quickly. Satsuki asked if the side they were in was the back entrance. No wonder it was so hard to find. The kid pointed to a tree and informed her it was behind that big tree. There was a hole they could go through to get to the nest. The kid glanced around, finding something to use as a weapon since there were still a lot of aliens inside the nest. Suddenly, Satsuki screamed, making the kid flinch and look at her. She pointed to a heart-shaped sculpture near a cliff. The kid asked what that was, and she answered it was a sculpture from the famous scene in Waves with You when Hiroko and Koji tied the knot. Legend has it that if two people kiss there, they will be together forever. The kid commented about it being so cliché. Satsuki was so excited and ran towards the sculpture, saying they'd completely reproduced the scenery too, and asked the kid to come over and look. The kid watched her, wondering if Satsuki was unaware that she was in the middle of work right now. In the past, Satsuki talked about Waves with You with Sasaki at a cafe restaurant. She told him it was her favorite romance TV series. Sasaki apologized because he didn't know it. Satsuki waved her hands, saying it was fine but was really interesting, so he should watch it. It was a bit old, but she secretly watched the reruns behind her parents' backs when she was little. Sasaki had a solemn expression when he told her he wanted to watch it, but he didn't have a TV at home. Satsuki stutteringly explained he could watch older TV shows through subscriptions, but quickly stopped when she realized Sasaki didn't have a phone either. With a blush on her face, Satsuki asked Sasaki if he wanted to watch it at her house. Seeing his reaction, she quickly waved her hand and apologized, telling him to forget it since at-home dates were too early for them. She stood up to grab a drink, but Sasaki suddenly spoke. He said he wanted to go wherever Satsuki wanted to go. Satsuki stared at Sasaki, wondering why she always ended up feeling a little sad whenever he smiled. She excitedly asked to go to the film site of Waves with You together. Sasaki agreed and asked where it was. She responded she didn't know but would look it up. After remembering the past, Satsuki looked at the sculpture and the scenery, realizing it wasn't the scenery she wanted to see. It was Sasaki looking at this scenery that she wanted to see. Just then, the long-haired alien landed on the sculpture, breaking it. He laughed, saying there were ants here too. They saved him the trouble of looking for the nest since they led him to it. He continued to cackle, saying they were the best and he'd surely end their lives quickly. Satsuki's expression couldn't be read as she stared at the broken sculpture. The kid started to remember what happened inside the nest. His childhood friend grabbed onto a Hamaho alien. She was visibly tired, trying to mumble something. He shouted, asking what she had just said, and told her she should be more vocal at times like this. She was always so shy, so when did she get that strong? The girl mumbled before shouting for him to run. The kid blanked out as he remembered and internally asked himself why he ran away. He could have saved her if they tried to beat that alien up. He gasped and returned to reality when Satsuki shouted for him to go. He turned to her confusedly. Satsuki asked what he was standing there for. She said she'd deal with the alien, so he should go ahead and go to the nest. The kid nervously asked what she meant by go ahead. There were many aliens in the nest, too, and he didn't even have a weapon. But he couldn't finish his sentence when Satsuki grabbed his jacket, saying this wasn't the time to be rambling. He should have heard what the alien said. He said he'll end them and go to the nest. She could feel it. The alien was super strong, so she can't protect him while fighting. The kid tried to speak, but Satsuki pulled his jacket and told him not to fall in love with someone so half-heartedly. He should put his life on the line for the person he loves. He was terrified but still ran inside, shouting he'd definitely come back in one piece, asking her not to die, and even calling her a love maniac. Satsuki reached for the bat on her back, while the alien asked whether she wasn't going to run away. He scoffed and commented that she was rather courageous for an ant. However, Satsuki cut him off, complaining that aliens kept getting in her way. First, he took her present with Sasaki, and now, even her future with him. She angrily shouted she definitely won't forgive him and would beat him up. She held the bat, ready to attack. The alien raised its fist, telling her to bring it on and to entertain him. Satsuki blocked his punch, frowning, and continued to block his attacks with her club. The alien threw a punch, and Satsuki dodged, leaning down. However, he attacked her with his knee. While Satsuki was surprised, the alien threw another punch. She was able to block it with her bat, but the impact blew her away. As she was falling, the alien jumped to stomp on her. Smoke started to rise, and the alien praised her for dodging it. Satsuki quickly got up, holding her bat. He commented about Satsuki being stronger than she looked and laughed, saying it'd be fine if he cranked it up. Satsuki observed him rambling. He talks like a little kid, but isn't just some musclehead. He's fast, and he has a tremendous sense for combat. If they end up fighting for real, all of her energy will go towards defense. Then, the next move sets the game. It doesn't matter where as long as the hit land. She watched the alien motion for her to come, saying it was her turn. Now was her chance. Because these types never dodge. She swung her bat, and as expected, he didn't dodge and instead blocked it with its arms. Satsuki smirked as she watched the alien observe his arm. Meanwhile, the kid headed to the entrance and into the nest. He was holding a stick as he looked around, his legs trembling. He was confused to see the empty entrance. The aliens were all gone, and he could easily get to where everyone was. He looked down at his clothes and rubbed on the floor to make himself a little dirtier. In the nest, a man looked up and noticed it had been pretty quiet for a while now. He didn't see the aliens on guard duty, either. Another person wondered if something happened outside. Another exclaimed that maybe someone had come to save them. The girl looked up and saw the kid standing, holding a stick, and asking them to be quiet. He was Fuda. He looked down at them, staring at the girl. A man asked how he got there. Fuda wanted to say that he saw a few aliens on the way, but he beat them. However, another person asked if someone had come to rescue them, cutting him off. He answered that military personnel escorted him to the nest, although she was a high schooler. She mentioned her comrades being around, so that might be why the aliens were all somewhere else. The people cheered, thinking they were saved. However, Fuda spoke again, explaining that a different and stronger alien appeared, and the high schooler, Satsuki, was fighting it right now. Satsuki, who was fighting the alien, was terrified. The alien stood there, lifting his arm, which was hit in confusion, and asked her if she had done something. Her weapon didn't work on him. Satsuki continued to hit him with her bat. However, he wasn't exploding. The alien stood before her and asked what she was feeling so down about. He then commented on her weapon, saying it was interesting. The areas that got hit seemed to explode inside. He approached Satsuki, saying it was now his turn. They should make it a fight to remember. After defeating the Hamaho aliens on the other side of the forest, Muto finally entered the path leading to their nest. He leaned on the wall, wondering if it was clear now. All that's left is to head to the deepest area. Just then, his transceiver buzzed, and Miyoshi's voice reached him. He clicked on the radio transceiver and responded, asking if she was all right. Miyoshi said yes and reported that she had returned to the village and was guarding the villagers. Muto sighed in relief and asked for a sitrep. After hearing Miyoshi's explanation, he couldn't help but curse about the appearance of a different alien. He asked if she was able to contact those outside. Miyoshi replied that someone had destroyed the radio tower, so she couldn't establish contact. The backup radio was fine, but the truck was a bust, and the tire was flat, so they couldn't drive it. The Tobacco village had been completely closed off from the rest of the world. Muto asked if the long-haired alien did it, but Miyoshi said it wasn't. She thinks the chance of him being the culprit is low. He shouldn't have had the time to get down there before her. Based on how he acted, she was sure he would have attacked the villagers if he had been there. Muto understood the situation and ordered her to stay there and guard. However, he stopped talking when he noticed a robed person before him. Noticing Muto's sudden pause, Miyoshi asked what was wrong. But instead of responding to her, he asked the robed person who he was. In the west pathway, Fuda held his friend's hand while they ran away. The girl mumbled, but Fuda couldn't hear her and asked her to speak up. In a louder voice, she asked why it was just her. Fuda responded that they had no choice. He only had the strength to pull her up. The people there told them to leave while the aliens weren't there. They prioritized the two of them. So, he told her not to ask why it was only her and just think about how to get out of there. They were almost at the exit. Fuda could not finish his sentence when a Hamaho alien suddenly appeared behind them, trying to attack the girl. Fuda shielded her, and the girl fell to the floor. She got up and saw Fuda standing before her. He had a scratch on his back. She called out to him, but Fuda attacked the Hamaho alien while screaming. He grabbed a rock, angrily shouting about his back being hit. The girl watched in surprise as Fuda continuously hit the Hamaho alien with the rock, still shouting. He panted, looking at the squashed alien. He shouted not to look down on him. He made a promise that he won't run away anymore. He gasped when he saw the alien twitching on the floor. Then, he stood up and cheered for his victory. It was already hurt, but he defeated an alien. The girl asked if his back hurt. Fuda answered that it does. It hurt so much he could cry, but a guy shouldn't cry that easily. They started walking again, hurrying to the exit. However, when they arrived at the entrance, the long-haired alien was waiting for them to come out. The alien spoke, saying he was getting tired of waiting for him. Instead of going inside and searching, it would be way smarter if he waited for him to come out. He smirked as if making fun of them. The terrified Fuda asked where Satsuki was, and the alien informed him that she had kicked the bucket a while ago. Inside the Kumdran ship, Baman gave Pee-wee a lecture on Ajapper. He explained that the Ajapper is a power energy only intelligent beings have. This can be categorized into roughly two types. The first is the Ajapper that they were collecting. It was possible to measure and absorb, and the number goes up as the individual gets stronger. In a game, these would be levels, or they could be called the experience points one gains. The other is what circulates inside one's body, the inner Ajapper. This one can't be measured or absorbed. It was also tied to one's physical and mental state, so the amount could fluctuate. In a game, this would be mana points. The weapons they invented activated by depleting this inner Ajapper. For example, with the bat, an internal explosion occurs in the opponent when the necessary amount of inner Ajapper is poured to create an impact. Pee-wee asked why an explosion occurred. Baman explained that inner Ajapper differs between individuals and species. So far, they've confirmed over 120 different types. Pee-wee commented that it was a lot, and Baman continued to explain. According to him, the type difference of the inner Ajappers causes a chemical reaction. So, what's important is that there's a type difference. They looked at Satsuki's weapon usage log. There were 16 consecutive error messages. This means that if the opponent is the same type as the weapon wielder, an explosion won't occur. In the nest entrance on the west side, the long-haired alien kicked Fuda, making him collapse on the floor. He screamed in pain while the girl called out to him. The alien told him to stop screaming and that his job was done. He ordered him not to move so he could step on him. The girl stepped in front of Fuda to block him. The alien observed her. She had chestnut-colored hair. She was the target. He ordered her to move out of the way because his weakling comrade told him not to kill her. However, she refused to move and continued to stare at him. He stared back at her and saw an endless abyss in her eyes. He shuddered and started to feel like he was facing the abyss alone. He gasped, coming back to reality. He wondered what was the chill he felt and what was inside the kid. Just then, a rock was thrown at his head. The person who threw it stood at a distance. It was Satsuki, holding her bat. She was injured and panting. The long-haired alien turned to her, saying she hadn't given up the ghost yet. Satsuki called out to Fuda, asking what he was doing getting protected by the person he was supposed to protect. But even though he got beat up, he got her out of there. Satsuki gave him a thumbs up, saying what he did made him super cool. Then, she told the crying Fuda to leave the rest to her. The alien faced her, clicking his tongue. He asked what she meant by leaving the rest to her and said he had no interest in weaklings who can't fight anymore. So, she should hurry up and die. Satsuki responded, saying if he can't even finish off a weakling, that makes him the weakest in all of space. The alien was visibly pissed off by what she said. Suddenly, Satsuki turned and started to run. The two kids watched her in confusion while the long-haired alien asked what she was doing. She smirked and told him to come and get her, mocking his lame shoulder pads and weird hair. The long-haired alien dashed and followed her, angrily shouting he'd kill her. A few minutes ago, Satsuki woke up thinking she heard some random old man's voice in her head, but it was the Kumdran people. Baemin complained about her attitude when they woke her up. Satsuki asked why they contacted her all of a sudden. She thought they weren't going to have any sort of contact until she finished collecting enough Adjapper. Baemin retorted that they didn't say that. She was told they won't meet in person. Satsuki asked if Sasaki was okay. Baemin commented about her not changing because she even worried about her boyfriend in this situation before telling her not to worry. He's been sleeping in the storage capsule. She then realized what he had said and asked how he knew about her situation and where he was watching her from. Baemin replied that they hadn't been spying on her or anything. They just checked the usage log of her weapon from there. Satsuki started to complain about her weapon not working. She was paying the rental fee for this thing. She asked what was going on. Baemin asked her to calm down and listen. They weren't sure, but they won't benefit much if she died here, so they decided to give her some advice. They'll give her a brief explanation on why the weapon's not working, but it's all up to her to figure out how to overcome it. She asked him to tell her. Baemin explained that there was no guarantee that the attack would land. There's a chance that it won't. There's just one small chance to win. Back to the present, the long-haired alien followed Satsuki, asking how far she was going to run, and demanded that she turn around and die. However, Satsuki continued to run just a bit more. On the other pathway to the nest, Muto continued to ask the robed man who he was. He asked if he was the one who destroyed the radio tower and car, and if the long-haired alien was his ally or enemy. Since he is here in this nest, Muto assumes he is here for the same purpose and asks him why he is after the village girl. He demanded an answer. However, the robed man continued to stay silent. Seeing that, Muto told him he'll take that as resistance. He stared at the robed man who remained silent before swinging his blade. He decided to capture him and get an answer afterward. The robed man just stood there, watching Muto prepare for an attack. On the west side, Satsuki was panting as she dragged herself across the ground. The long-haired alien had enough and stomped on her back, grabbing her hair. He told her he hated chasing around weaklings that had no will to fight. She should give up and apologize about his shoulder pads before she dies. She mumbled before hitting his chin with a bat, yelling not to grab a girl's hair like that and calling him a shoulder pad idiot. She continued to crawl away as he spoke, saying Earthlings really don't get it. It's pointless for ants to resist. This is just a slaughter game. They're all just targets in this game. Teaming up with them was efficient, but now that he thought about it, he had the most fun running around solo. Satsuki continued to crawl, saying she didn't really get what he was saying, and asked when was that. The long-haired alien answered it was about 2 or 3 years ago. She asked if he killed humans, and if so, how many? The alien snickered, saying he doesn't keep track of the ants he's killed. Satsuki leaned on a tree, commenting on how he was beyond saving. The long-haired alien watched her and asked what she was trying to do and why she ran all the way out there. She pointed to the blood on the tree, explaining it was her blood. She left a mark there so she'd know where to come back to. She told him that if she was going to die, she wanted it to be there and to be killed by him. Since he's stronger than her, she wants him to be the one to take her out. He cracked his knuckles, accepting her request. It's been a while since he encountered a tough earthling and rambled about her lack of combat experience. She's so focused on landing a hit that she loses sight of everything else. At least that was praiseworthy. Satsuki cut him off and asked him to hurry up. He extended his hand, bidding her goodbye and telling her to rest peacefully. Satsuki's eyes suddenly opened, and she grabbed a nearby corpse of a Hamaho alien and threw it towards him. She got up, holding her bat as she prepared to attack. After the call with the Kumdrans, she noticed a Hamaho alien on the brink of death. It was the one she beat up on their way to the nest's entrance. And for some reason, a famous scene from Waves with You flashed through her mind. It was the scene where Koji asked if Hiroko could hear his heartbeat. Hiroko answered that she could, and his heartbeat traveled through her body like a rippling wave. Thanks to that scene, Satsuki finally realized what she had to do. If she can't deal damage directly, she can put a different specimen in between and deliver her attack out like a rippling wave. She's only got one chance, but she'll definitely carry it out. The moment he lowers his guard, she'll attack him. She hit the Hamaho alien with her bat, putting her all into this blow. The long-haired alien was blown away while his insides rumbled like electricity shooting everywhere. And finally, his body exploded. Smoke rose, and the long-haired alien lay there with a hole in his side. He screamed that it was inconceivable before flinching when Satsuki walked towards him. Satsuki couldn't believe she'd actually hear someone say that in real life. She had a smug smile with her bat resting on her shoulders. She mocked the long-haired alien, saying they should continue his favorite slaughter game. Thank you for watching, guys. I hope you love this manga. Have a good day.